tension in the room was palpable as Elon Musk sat across from Jimmy Kimmel. The late-night host, known for his quick wit and sarcasm, had invited Musk on his show for what was supposed to be a casual conversation. But this wasn't going to be like any other interview. Something had shifted and the audience could feel it. Jimmy Kimmel. So, Elon, you've been busy changing the world again. What's next? Are we going to Mars, or are you just going to keep tweeting like you own the place? Elon Musk. You could say I've been changing things, but I think it's about more than just Mars. It's about the way we communicate. The way we think. Right now, a lot of that is broken. The audience chuckled, not quite sure where this was heading. Kimmel's grin faded for a moment, sensing the subtle defiance in Musk's tone. He had expected the usual celebrity banter, not this. Jimmy Kimmel. Okay, so you're the self-proclaimed savior of free speech now? You know, some people think you're just a billionaire who's trying to make the rules and we're all just supposed to follow. Elon Musk. I don't see it that way. I think it's about making sure there's room for everyone's voice, not just the ones that fit the narrative. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Kimmel, never one to back down from a challenge, pressed further. Jimmy. Kimmel. Oh, really? And you think everyone should have the same platform? Even the crazy ones who think the world is flat or the ones who think you can turn water into fuel? Elon Musk. It's not about endorsing crazy ideas. It's about letting people speak. Whether we agree with them or not, it's important to hear them out. Kimmel chuckled, the tension rising in the room. Jimmy Kimmel. Well, I guess we'll have to see how far that goes. And by the way, you're not the only one with ideas about free speech, Elon. The air was thick with the kind of unease only a late-night interview could breed. But this was no ordinary conversation. Kimmel had tried to poke fun, but Musk wasn't biting. Instead, he remained composed, his words clear and deliberate. The audience was watching. Millions of viewers from across the country sat in their living rooms, on their phones, on their laptops. They could feel the building tension. What would happen next? No one knew, but the atmosphere was about to change dramatically. As the conversation grew more intense, it was clear that this wasn't just another celebrity interview. The jokes started to fall flat, and the audience began to notice a shift in the tone. What started as playful banter quickly turned into something much darker. The unsaid tension lingered between Jimmy Kimmel and Elon Musk, but it wasn't just on stage. It was in the air itself, thick with judgment, expectation, and an underlying sense of power being wielded. Jimmy Kimmel. So, Elon, I hear you're a big fan of free speech, right? But let's be real. Free speech works best when we all play by the same rules, and I think you've bent those rules quite a bit. Elon Musk. I'm not bending anything. I'm just making sure there's space for everyone. Whether it's unpopular opinions or controversial ideas, we can't just shut down voices because they don't fit with what's comfortable. The words hung in the air, and Kimmel's smirk faltered for a split second. But he quickly recovered, leaning into his late-night host persona. Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah, but there's a difference between giving everyone a platform and just letting chaos reign. I mean, we can't let everyone have the mic, can we? Some people just have no business being heard. The audience could feel the subtle shift in dynamics. Kimmel, once the host in control, was starting to lose his grip. Musk's calm confidence was unnerving. Instead of being rattled, he seemed to be digging in deeper. Elon Musk. If the mic is only given to a certain type of person, then we're not really allowing free speech. We're just reinforcing the same old echo chambers. Everyone deserves a chance to speak, even the ones who make us uncomfortable. There was a moment of silence, a palpable pause that made everyone shift in their seats. The balance of power was tipping, and it wasn't going in Kimmel's favor. His audience had come expecting jokes, expecting the usual banter, but now they were watching a confrontation. And though Kimmel had been prepared for this interview to be about Musk's latest endeavors, the direction it had taken was something he hadn't planned for. Jimmy Kimmel. So what you're saying is, we should just let everyone air their grievances. Let's give a platform to everyone, even the people who have dangerous ideas. Because that sounds like a recipe for disaster. Musk's eyes locked onto Kimmel's, unflinching. It was as though he had already anticipated the resistance and was ready to face it head-on. Elon Musk. I'm not talking about giving dangerous ideas a free pass. I'm talking about real conversation. It's messy, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. The alternative is censorship, and we're already seeing what that leads to. Kimmel's eyes narrowed, the room now thick with tension. The power dynamics had shifted. Kimmel was no longer the unquestioned authority, the figure in charge of the interview. Musk wasn't just a guest anymore, he was a challenge. And as the conversation continued, the injustice became clearer. Kimmel's attempts to control the narrative were being met with resistance, and it wasn't just Musk he was up against. It was something much larger. The air was thick with discomfort as Jimmy Kimmel pressed on, his voice losing the playful tone it once had. He could feel the shift. What had started as a light-hearted banter was spiraling into something he wasn't fully prepared for. Musk wasn't backing down, and the more Kimmel tried to regain control, the more he pushed Musk into a corner, both figuratively and literally. Kimmel's smug grin returned, but now it felt rehearsed, forced. He wasn't just mocking Musk anymore, he was trying to undermine him. The crowd had sensed the change in energy too. The laughter had become more hollow, the applause less enthusiastic. Kimmel could feel the weight of the room shift as the audience's attention wavered, torn between their loyalty to the host and their curiosity about the billionaire who seemed unshaken. Jimmy Kimmel. Look, Elon, we get it. You want to be the free speech hero, but there's a line. There's a responsibility with that, don't you think? You can't just let anyone say whatever they want without consequences. Elon Musk. Responsibility isn't about silencing voices. It's about making sure all voices are heard, even the uncomfortable ones. The question is, who decides which voices matter and which ones don't? The tension was palpable. Kimmel's control was slipping, and as he tried to regain it, his words grew more pointed. His attempts to dismiss Musk were no longer playful jabs. They were calculated attempts to push Musk into a corner, to make him out to be the villain. But Musk wasn't taking the bait. His calm demeanor only served to highlight Kimmel's growing frustration. Jimmy Kimmel. Okay. But not all opinions are created equal. You're talking about giving a platform to everyone, even people who spread lies, who create chaos. Isn't there a responsibility to stop that before it spreads like wildfire? Elon Musk. I'm not talking about giving a platform to hate or lies. I'm talking about creating a space where people can speak openly, without fear of being silenced by a handful of elites who decide what's acceptable. If we can't do that, then we're already lost. Kimmel's expression tightened. It was clear he was trying to dominate the conversation, but every attempt to rein in Musk only seemed to strengthen the billionaire's resolve. And Musk wasn't done yet. There was more at stake here than just this interview. He could feel the underlying currents, Hollywood's control, the media's manipulation, and it was becoming clear that Kimmel wasn't just an unwilling participant. He was a tool in a much bigger game. The audience watched in silence, their collective breath held, waiting for the next move. And Kimmel, sensing the shift in the room, pushed further. His attempts to control the narrative were no longer subtle. He was now directly questioning Musk's motives. Jimmy Kimmel. So you're telling me that all this talk about free speech is just a way to sell your platform? A way to get people to flock to you instead of the mainstream media? Elon Musk. No, Jimmy. I'm telling you that people are tired of being told what to think. They want to be heard, and the more you try to shut them down, the louder they're going to get. The room fell into a charged silence as Kimmel's attempt to control the conversation met a powerful wall of resistance. The dynamics had changed. Kimmel had tried to manipulate the narrative, but Musk had deflected each blow with the precision of someone who knew exactly how the game was played. And as the minutes passed, it became clear. This wasn't just about an interview. This was about a battle for control, and Kimmel was starting to lose. The more he pressed, the more he revealed the underlying abuse of power that had always existed in Hollywood. And now it was exposed for everyone to see. The tension reached a breaking point as the camera rolled. It was as if the air itself had thickened, heavy with anticipation and something else, something much darker. The audience, previously caught in the back and forth between two powerful personalities, now sat in uncomfortable silence. The battle had shifted from playful banter to something more sinister. Jimmy Kimmel, once the confident late-night king, seemed to be unraveling before their eyes. His every word now sounded forced, desperate to regain control of a situation that had slipped beyond his reach. Jimmy Kimmel. Come on, Elon, you're telling me we're all supposed to just, throw out the rules? Let everyone have a free-for-all? Is that really what you think the world needs right now? More chaos? Elon Musk. Chaos is the excuse they give to control the narrative. What the world needs is balance, the freedom to speak without fear. That's the difference. Kimmel's eyes narrowed, his fingers drumming on the desk, clearly growing frustrated. He had expected Musk to crumble, to backpedal under the weight of his jabs. But Musk wasn't playing the game. The smug confidence Kimmel had once relied on was now fading, replaced by a growing sense of panic. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Musk was supposed to buckle under pressure, just like everyone else who had ever been on the receiving end of Kimmel's sharp tongue. Instead, Musk had turned the tables, leaving Kimmel scrambling for control. Jimmy Kimmel. You know, Elon, you might have the tech world at your fingertips, but out here, in the real world, we don't just hand out microphones to everyone. That's not how things work. But this time, Kimmel's words landed like a punch in the gut. It wasn't just the way he said it. It was the realization that he wasn't just attacking Musk anymore. He was attacking the very idea of free speech, and the more he dug in, the more he exposed himself, peeling back the layers of a man who had used his position to dictate what people could and couldn't say, what they should and shouldn't hear. The audience, which had once applauded Kimmel's quick wit, was now eerily quiet. The laughter, the energy, it all felt hollow. Kimmel could sense it, but he was too far gone. Musk had been the catalyst that exposed a deeper truth. It was the kind of truth that, when spoken out loud, couldn't be unsaid. And then, the unthinkable happened. Kimmel made his final move, one that he believed would silence Musk once and for all. He leaned in, smirking in the way only Kimmel could. Jimmy Kimmel. You're like a modern-day prophet, Elon. Tell me, do you think you're going to save the world with this nonsense? Because if so, you've lost me. There it was, the breaking point. The words that Kimmel hoped would land with. Authority instead struck a chord that reverberated through the room. Musk, with a single glance, gave a quiet nod. He understood. He wasn't going to fight back with words. The battle wasn't about winning an argument. It was about something bigger, something that Kimmel in his arrogance failed to see until it was too late. In that moment, the true power dynamics were revealed. Kimmel had tried to humiliate Musk, to shut him down with his biting words and ridicule. But Musk, unshaken and unwavering, had exposed the lie beneath Kimmel's persona. He wasn't the clever, all-knowing host anymore. He was the embodiment of a system that tried to silence those who didn't fit into its narrative. The crowd, sensing the shift, began to murmur. A few tentative claps broke the silence, but it wasn't enough to mask the underlying truth that had surfaced. The moment Kimmel had been trying to control, to dominate, had slipped through his fingers. And Musk had become more than just a guest. He had become a symbol. Kimmel's confidence faltered. His attempt to shame Musk had backfired. Musk wasn't the one on trial here, it was Kimmel, and everything he represented. The next day, the internet exploded. News outlets, social media platforms, and talk shows, every corner of the public sphere was buzzing with the fallout from the Kimmel-Musk confrontation. But amidst the noise, something unexpected happened. The truth began to surface piece by piece. It wasn't the drama of the late-night showdown that took center stage. It was the quiet moments, the ones that Kimmel had thought he could control, that turned the tide. Elon Musk. Sometimes the quietest words say the most. That one sentence, simple, yet profound, became a rallying cry for millions. Musk didn't go on a public tirade. He didn't try to diminish Kimmel or anyone else. He just let the silence speak for itself, and it did. But behind that silence was something deeper, a secret that Kimmel, in his arrogance, had missed entirely. Musk's online followers quickly dug into the archives of his past, uncovering something extraordinary. Elon Musk had been speaking out about free speech, about censorship, about the dangers of narrative control long before he entered the fray with Kimmel. His battle was never about one late-night host or one moment of embarrassment. It was part of something much larger. Jimmy Kimmel. What the hell? Where did this come from? Kimmel had been under the assumption that Musk's appearance on his show was just another celebrity interview, another notch in his belt. But Musk had never been just another celebrity. He was a visionary, a man who had made his wealth by challenging the status quo, by questioning everything, by disrupting industries. Kimmel had underestimated him, believing that his reputation and power in late-night television would be enough to crush any opposition. Jimmy Kimmel. He's got the whole world fooled, doesn't he? Like he's some kind of martyr now. It's ridiculous. But Kimmel's words were hollow. The public wasn't buying into his narrative anymore. They had seen something else in Musk, a man who wasn't afraid to take risks, to go against the grain, to stand up for what he believed in. And now that belief had a name. It was about the freedom to speak without fear of being silenced by the powerful forces that controlled the media, the narrative, the public discourse. The more people learned about Musk's long-standing commitment to these ideals, the more they began to see him not as the villain of Kimmel's show, but as the hero of something much bigger. The turning point wasn't just about the battle between Musk and Kimmel. It was about the realization that Musk's fight was everyone's fight, his voice no longer muffled by the entertainment industry's demands or the weight of public ridicule, had sparked something in the public. People started talking, questioning, and challenging the narratives that had been fed to them for years. Jimmy Kimmel. This isn't just about me, is it? Kimmel's arrogance had begun to falter, replaced by a creeping sense of doubt. The more the public rallied behind Musk, the more Kimmel realized he had underestimated the power of the truth. In that moment, it wasn't just Musk's words that were cutting through the noise. It was the hidden truth about his own struggle, his own journey, his willingness to sacrifice everything for what he believed in. The power dynamic had shifted. Musk wasn't just challenging Kimmel. He was challenging a system that had long silenced voices like his. And in that quiet revolution, the tide had begun to turn. The moment Musk shared his thoughts on free speech, the tide started to turn. It wasn't just about his words anymore. It was about the movement they had inspired. In the days following the confrontation, more and more people began to join Musk's side, drawn not just by his vision but by his courage. The tyrant free speech movement, once a whisper in the halls of obscure forums, exploded into a roar. It was clear. Elon Musk wasn't the villain anymore. He had become a symbol of resistance, and his message was reaching people from all walks of life. Elon Musk. We are told what to think, how to think, when to think it, and now they want to decide what we say. It's time to fight for our freedom to speak the truth no matter the cost. Musk's words were gaining traction everywhere. What began as a spark on social media was now a fire burning through the streets, workplaces, and homes across America and beyond. People who had never cared much about free speech or media control suddenly realized they were being manipulated, and they were furious. In the heart of Hollywood, Kimmel's team saw the writing on the wall. The backlash was growing. Viewership for his late-night show began to drop steadily, and advertisers, once lining up to associate with the host's comedic brand, began to hesitate. Sponsors pulled their ads, citing the rising controversy surrounding the show. Kimmel's producers, who had once been confident that their show was untouchable, now faced the harsh reality that they were losing their grip. Jimmy Kimmel, where is the line? Why is this happening? I'm a late-night host, not some political mouthpiece. But the truth was that Kimmel had become just that, a mouthpiece for the very system Musk was trying to expose. Kimmel's jokes, his carefully curated persona, all served to reinforce the status quo. Musk's challenge to that narrative was a direct threat to everything Kimmel stood for. Kimmel couldn't see it yet, but the public was no longer laughing, along with him. They were listening to the quiet, steady call for change. Musk wasn't just a figure on TV or an entrepreneur with a string of successful companies. He had become the voice of a movement that was calling for transparency, honesty, and the right to think for oneself. And Kimmel, for all his attempts to brush it off, was now a part of the system that was being challenged. As Kimmel struggled to regain control over the narrative, Musk's influence continued to grow. His followers didn't just agree with him. They rallied behind him, creating a network of support that Kimmel had no way of stopping. The more Kimmel fought to suppress the narrative, the more it spread. The power dynamic was shifting. Musk's message of truth had gained momentum, and the walls of control that Kimmel had relied on were beginning to crumble. Elon Musk: I'm not here to fight anyone. I'm here because I believe it's time to let the truth be heard. No more silence. The world was watching. The battle was no longer just about late-night television. It was about something much bigger. The struggle for control over what people were allowed to hear, see, and say. But Kimmel wasn't going down without a fight. The resistance was only beginning. And while the power was shifting, the fight was far from over. The air had thickened. It wasn't just in the studio or behind closed doors. It was everywhere. Across the media landscape, the narrative had shifted from laughing at Elon Musk to questioning his power and influence. The public's perception had evolved, and with it, the very structure of authority had started to crumble. Jimmy Kimmel had always been a master of controlling the conversation. His late-night show had been a fortress of comedic dominance until now. The energy had shifted in the studio. You could almost feel it through the screen. The jokes that once had the audience in stitches now landed flat, their punchlines no longer landing the way they once had. The laughter felt mechanical, strained. Kimmel was losing his grasp, and he knew it. Jimmy Kimmel. We can't keep pretending this isn't happening. We need something big, something that puts Musk back in his place. But no matter how hard he tried to steer the narrative back into his hands, the world was no longer interested in his scripted rants. They were listening to Musk, watching his every move. In a final, desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative, Kimmel made a decision. He announced that he was inviting Elon Musk back on the show for an exclusive interview, and I attempt to bring him into his world, under his terms. Jimmy Kimmel, this is going to be good. I'm going to get him to admit how absurd all of this really is. The producers were uneasy. They had seen the audience react, and this wasn't going to be like any other show. But it was too late. The invitation had been extended. Kimmel was committed, or so he thought. When Elon Musk walked into the studio, the atmosphere shifted instantly. There was no fanfare, no grand entrance, just Musk standing in front of the camera, calm and collected. He wasn't here to play the game on Kimmel's terms. He was here on his own. Elon Musk. Let's get this over with. The tension in the air was palpable. Kimmel, the seasoned host, was out of his element, his usual comedic timing nowhere to be found. Musk, on the other hand, was completely in control. The studio audience could feel it. The power had shifted, and for the first time it was clear that Kimmel wasn't the one in charge. The roles had reversed. Jimmy Kimmel. So, Elon, you've created an entire platform that's, well, let's just say, interesting. How's that working out for you? Elon Musk. It's not about working out. It's about creating space for people to speak without fear of being silenced. You've been part of that problem, Jimmy. It's not a joke anymore. The shift in the conversation was undeniable. Kimmel had expected Musk to play along, to fall into the trap of the usual late-night banter. Instead, Musk had turned the tables, challenging the very system that Kimmel had been a part of for so long. Kimmel's smile faltered. The audience, once in his corner, had begun to shift. The laughter that filled the air moments ago was now quiet murmurs of uncertainty. Musk was not just exposing Kimmel's failure to adapt. He was shining a light on the crumbling foundations of the entire late-night industry, a system built on controlling narratives, not letting them evolve. Elon Musk. This isn't about me, Jimmy. This is about everyone who's been silenced, who's been pushed out of the conversation. Your show, your entire format, it's based on controlling what people hear. But the world's changing, and you can't stop it. Kimmel tried to regain control, but it was too late. The confrontation had shifted the balance of power irreparably. The audience was no longer laughing at Musk. They were beginning to listen. Kimmel, the king of late night, was no longer the one calling the shots. And Elon Musk? He wasn't just a businessman. He had become a symbol of resistance, a voice for the voiceless. The power dynamic had shifted completely and there was no going back. The moment of reckoning arrived faster than anyone could have anticipated. What seemed like a small shift in power had now grown into a force that no one, not even Jimmy Kimmel, could ignore. Kimmel's attempts to salvage his image, to regain control of his audience, only seemed to make matters worse. The ratings for his show continued to plummet. Advertisers, once lining up to sponsor his segments, were now fleeing in droves. A once popular late-night staple was now being labeled as out of touch, outdated, and irrelevant. Kimmel's reputation, carefully cultivated over years of polished comedy, was crumbling before his very eyes. But the public wasn't sympathetic. They saw the betrayal, the hypocrisy. They knew that Kimmel's show, his entire persona, was built on crafting narratives that silenced those who challenged the status quo. The masses were no longer interested in his jokes. They wanted authenticity. They wanted the truth. And they had found it in Elon Musk. Jimmy Kimmel. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. But no amount of pacing, no amount of anger could stop the inevitable. Kimmel was becoming a relic, a symbol of everything that was wrong with mainstream media, a figure who had been too comfortable in his position of power, too smug in his ability to manipulate the public's narrative. And the more he fought to hold on, the more he exposed just how much power he had lost. Then came the tipping point. A major studio backed out of a multi-million-dollar deal, citing Kimmel's controversial interview with Musk as the reason. The studio had been under heavy pressure from both the public and advertisers who were aligned with Musk's growing movement. They couldn't afford to keep associating with a figure who had become a symbol of media manipulation. Jimmy Kimmel. They're dropping us? They're really dropping us? The announcement was made public the next day, and it sent shockwaves through the media world. Jimmy Kimmel, the man who had once held so much influence over American culture, was now being cast aside. It wasn't just about his show anymore. It was about the message. The people had spoken and they weren't going to sit idly by and watch their voices be silenced any longer. For Musk, the justice wasn't in seeing Kimmel's fall. It was in the message that this sent. It was a victory for free speech, for the idea that the public could rise above the narratives that had been force-fed to them for years. It was a victory for those who had been shouted down and pushed aside. Musk had played the long game, never getting caught up in the petty fights, never getting distracted by Kimmel's attempts to draw him into the chaos. Elon Musk. Silencing people isn't strength. It's a sign of weakness. The public began to notice what Kimmel had failed to. The people were no longer asking for permission to speak. They were taking back control, using the platforms that had once been used to silence them. Musk's message wasn't just about his personal rise. It was about empowering the millions who felt they had been pushed aside. For Kimmel, the moment of reckoning wasn't just professional. It was personal. He had spent so many years building an empire based on controlling the narrative, based on dismissing those who challenged the system. But now the very system he had built was turning on him. Jimmy Kimmel. I thought I could control it all, but the world's changing and I didn't change with it. The world wasn't waiting for Jimmy Kimmel anymore. It had moved on to something far more powerful. And as Kimmel faced the harsh consequences of his actions, Musk stood tall, his silence now louder than any joke Kimmel could ever deliver. The justice had been served. Not in the way Kimmel might have expected, but in the most poetic, undeniable way possible. The fallout from Jimmy Kimmel's downfall was swift and brutal. The man who had once ruled late-night television was now a shadow of his former self, a cautionary tale of hubris and the perils of silencing others. The once-packed studio was now eerily quiet, the vibrant energy replaced with whispers of what had gone wrong. Kimmel's departure from the spotlight wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Corporate sponsors stopped calling, viewers switched off, and what was once a household name was now just another relic of a bygone era. His show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, was officially canceled, replaced with programming that aligned more closely with the new wave of media, authentic, raw, and unafraid, to tackle uncomfortable truths. Jimmy Kimmel. I built this, but I couldn't see that the world was moving on. It wasn't just the loss of his show that hurt Kimmel the most. It was the loss of his credibility. The respect he once commanded had evaporated overnight, replaced by a public shunning that no amount of apologies or self-reflection could mend. His attempts to regain control of the narrative fell flat, and any opportunity for redemption slipped further away with each passing day. On the other side, Elon Musk's victory was not in gloating, but in reclaiming something far more precious: the freedom to speak, the freedom to be heard. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the millions who had felt ignored, marginalized, and silenced. Musk had become a symbol, not of one man's rise, but of a collective movement. Elon Musk. True change isn't about silencing voices, it's about amplifying them. Musk had shown the world that power didn't lie in controlling the narrative. It lay in trusting people to make their own decisions, to think for themselves. And with that, he had become more than just an entrepreneur. He had become a movement leader, a man who embodied the values of freedom and independence. Musk's personal brand skyrocketed to new heights, not because of his wealth or his tech empire, but because of his commitment to standing firm in the face of opposition. He didn't need to fight back with anger. He fought back with truth, with silence, with the courage to speak when others wanted to muzzle him. But it wasn't just Musk who emerged victorious. The real victory was for the public, for the voices that had long been ignored. Open Frame, the platform that had sprung from Musk's refusal to back down, was now a cultural force. It was a space where anyone, from any background, could speak their truth without fear of retribution. Millions of people began to use it to have conversations that mattered. Elon Musk. Look at what we've done. This is just the beginning. The justice was clear. Kimmel, once the king of late-night television, was relegated to history. His power had been stripped away by the very force he had tried to suppress: free speech. Musk had not only defended his own voice, he had sparked a movement that changed the landscape of media forever. For Kimmel, the aftermath wasn't just a loss of career. It was the realization that he had lost touch with what truly mattered. His arrogance had led him to believe that he could control the narrative, but in the end, it was the people who had the last word. Jimmy Kimmel. Maybe I didn't understand the power of a voice. Maybe I never did. Kimmel's fall wasn't just about ratings or money. It was about the way people had been treated by those in power. And in the end, the justice wasn't just Musk's victory. It was a win for everyone who had ever been silenced, dismissed, or told to stay quiet. As the dust settled and the world moved on from the chaos of Jimmy Kimmel's downfall, the question remained: what did it all mean? The headlines had long since moved on, but the story of Elon Musk, Kimmel, and the clash of ideals lingered in the background of people's minds. For some, this story was about one man's rise against the odds, an underdog who refused to stay quiet in the face of overwhelming opposition. But for many others, the lesson was far more profound. It was a reminder that when we allow a few to control the conversation, we all lose. The moment that had started with a small public spat between two powerful figures had become a symbol for a much larger battle for the freedom to think, to speak, and to be heard. Musk's quiet yet powerful return to the public eye wasn't just a personal victory, it was a revolution in itself. He had built an empire in technology, but in that moment, he had built something even more valuable: a platform for people to reclaim their voices. Open Frame wasn't just a tech product, It was a movement. And it wasn't just about having a voice. It was about how we choose to use it. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more awesome content.